I'm Alana Price, 34 years old, and life has taught me that the deepest cuts often come from kin, not strangers. It's those closest to us who can inflict the most lasting pain. My father, Richard Price, was a man whose world revolved around order, heritage, and his own self-importance. For 42 years, he was part of the same aeronautics firm, working his way up from a junior designer to chief executive officer. The company was his entire existence. His two sons, my brothers, were his pride and joy, his legacy. As for me, I was merely present. The day before his retirement gala, I found myself in front of my bedroom mirror, practicing a speech I was unsure I wanted to deliver. A few kind words, a toast, something generic, expected, because that's how I'd always navigated our relationship, trying not to give him more reasons for disappointment. Behind me, on the dresser, sat the gift, wrapped in forest green paper with a gold ribbon. Understated, refined. Inside was a small but significant item, or at least it had once been. As I rehearsed my lines, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was a sense that nothing I said would truly matter, because nothing I ever did seemed to be enough. Before I continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt overlooked by someone who was supposed to value you? If so, give this a thumbs up and subscribe. This story might resonate with you, and perhaps it will offer a new perspective. Growing up in suburban Chicago, the Price household was structured, traditional, and stifling. We weren't impoverished, but affection was dispensed sparingly, as if it were a luxury. My brothers, Kevin and Ryan, were the quintessential all-American boys, baseball scouts destined for the military. My father idolized them. They were perfect in his eyes. Then there was me. I was introspective, inquisitive, fascinated by astronomy and the cosmos. I'd secretly read science journals in my room, hiding them like other girls hid fashion magazines. At 11, I built a working model of a lunar rover from spare parts. My mother applauded. My father questioned where I'd gotten the materials. I learned early that I didn't fit his mold. He never explicitly said it. He didn't need to. It was evident in how he introduced my brothers at family gatherings. This is Kevin, recently promoted to sergeant, and Ryan now leads our experimental design team, he'd say. Then he'd offer a polite smile in my direction and say, and this is Alana. She's artistic. Artistic, as if it were a character flaw. I graduated with honors in mechanical engineering from MIT, working 2 jobs to cover the expenses not covered by scholarships. No one from my family attended the ceremony. My father sent a brief text. Congrats. Didn't realize that was today. Still, I persisted. I accepted a challenging position as a systems engineer at Caltech's Jet Propulsion Lab. I worked long hours, submitted patents, and co-authored research papers. By 29, I was managing a division. By 31, I became the youngest female engineering director in the organization's history. Yet at every family holiday, when my father raised his glass, his toasts were exclusively for my brothers. So, when the invitation to his retirement gala arrived, a formal event at the Four Seasons with speeches, awards, and a slideshow of his career, I almost declined. Almost. But a part of me needed to be there. Not for him, but for myself. That week, I flew back to Chicago, booked a room downtown, and attempted to compose a neutral speech, something that wouldn't escalate the situation, something painless. Because unknown to everyone, even my therapist, I still harbored a foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the night he'd finally express something different, something genuine. Instead, the night would conclude with me presenting him with that wrapped box and walking away for good. But that was still in the future, and the rehearsal was just that, a rehearsal. I still clung to a naive belief that if I chose the right words, wore the perfect dress, and smiled just so, I could rewrite our narrative, repair what was broken. Little did I know what he would say in his speech. and I was unaware of the depth of the wound it would inflict, or the liberating sensation of finally bleeding and walking away with my head held high. I arrived at the Four Seasons 20 minutes early, not by choice, but because anxiety often compels me to overcompensate. The valet reached for my keys and I hesitated. The obsidian black Audi wasn't ostentatious by California standards, but in my family, it screamed tech professional trying too hard. Nevertheless, I handed over the keys and entered. The ballroom was already partially filled, round tables adorned with ivory linens, floral centerpieces so tall they obstructed conversations, and waiters moving with quiet efficiency. A slideshow of my father's career played on a loop behind the podium. His younger image dominated the large screen, posing in front of aircraft models, shaking hands with dignitaries, receiving awards, always in impeccably tailored suits. Family photos were absent from the montage. No childhood birthdays, no holiday celebrations. Only him in monochrome power stances, as if emotion would tarnish the legacy. I stood near the entrance, scanning for familiar faces. My mother caught my eye across the room and gave a subtle wave, a quick, discreet gesture, like someone avoiding attention. She had always found ways to support me quietly from the sidelines. "Well, look who decided to show up," a voice said from behind. It was Kevin. He resembled a budding politician. Sharp suit, perfect smile, and a hint of self-satisfaction. Ryan followed closely, offering a curt nod as he adjusted his tie. "Alana," Kevin greeted me, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a formality. "Still with NASA or SpaceX or whatever it is?" "Still at JPL," I replied, my tone neutral. "Right, the telescope place," Ryan added. "Dad always says it's more science club than actual engineering." I offered a tight smile. "Well, we did land a rover on Mars, so I think we're doing something right." They chuckled, not unkindly but dismissively, and moved on to greet other guests. And just like that, I was transported back to high school feeling invisible. The girl with the unconventional ambitions, the unconventional dreams. A waiter passed by with champagne. I took a glass. Across the room, I saw my father, tall, composed in a dark gray suit. He was surrounded by executives and former colleagues, his laughter booming, his gestures expansive, the retiring king holding court. I waited for him to acknowledge me. He didn't. But he looked at my brothers, clapped Ryan on the back, his expression filled with pride. He glanced at my mother and even gave her a rare kiss on the forehead. And as the event coordinator asked everyone to take their seats, he didn't seem to notice I was still standing by the entrance, quietly debating whether I should have come at all. Just as I turned to leave, I felt a gentle touch on my arm. "Alana." My mother's voice was soft but firm. "Please don't go. He'll say something. Tonight is about all of us." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that for once, he'd recognize more than just his two sons and their military accolades. That maybe, just maybe, he'd say my name with pride. But then the lights dimmed, and the MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor a titan of industry, a man who dedicated over 4 decades to advancing aerospace technology. Please welcome the one and only Richard Price." Thunderous applause filled the room. My father walked onto the stage, waving like a seasoned politician, pausing for dramatic effect before speaking. I arrived at the Four Seasons Hotel a deliberately early 20 minutes before the scheduled start time, not out of any particular desire to be punctual, but rather driven by the relentless grip of anxiety, which has a peculiar way of compelling me to overcompensate in social situations. The impeccably dressed valet approached to take possession of my car keys, and I experienced a moment of hesitation. The sleek obsidian black Audi wasn't considered particularly flashy or ostentatious by the standards of Los Angeles, where I now resided, but within the context of my family dynamics, it felt almost rebellious, as if I were a tech professional trying too hard to impress. Nevertheless, I ultimately relinquished the keys and made my way inside the hotel. The grand ballroom was already partially filled with guests, and when the polite yet sharp laughter rippled through the room, It cut deeper than any silence. I stood up, every eye turned toward me. I walked forward slowly, not toward the stage, but to its edge. I held the small green wrapped box in both hands. My voice remained steady. "From your greatest disappointment," I said calmly, offering him the gift. "Enjoy your retirement." And I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the polished floor, not a single part of me faltering, rushing, or shrinking. I didn't look back. I didn't drive straight home after leaving the ballroom. Instead, I parked in a secluded area of the hotel garage, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. My chest felt tight, but not with panic. Not anymore. I experienced something different, something slower, colder, like standing in a long-anticipated snowstorm. On the passenger seat, my evening clutch vibrated. A text from Mom, another from Claire, my closest friend from college, who had strongly advised me against attending the retirement party. And then another. What was in the box? That one was from Ryan. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the messages because I knew the moment was unfolding in that ballroom, the one I had just left and the one I hadn't fully escaped. I knew my father wouldn't open the box immediately. Not in front of everyone. He was too dignified for that, too concerned with appearances. But his curiosity would eventually prevail. Because if Richard Price abhorred anything more than weakness, it was a lack of control. "Alana," Kevin greeted me, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a formal business transaction than a warm familial embrace. "Still involved with NASA or SpaceX or whatever it is you're doing out there?" "Still at JPL?" I responded, carefully maintaining a neutral and even tone. "Right, the telescope place," Ryan added, his tone slightly dismissive. "Dad always says it's more of a science club than actual engineering." I offered a tight, polite smile, already rehearsing my practiced response. "Well, considering we successfully landed a rover on Mars, I think it's safe to say we're accomplishing something of significance." They both chuckled, not with any overt malice, but with a distinct air of dismissal, and then proceeded to move on to greet another cluster of guests. And in that instant, I was abruptly transported back to the familiar and painful dynamics of high school, once again feeling utterly invisible and insignificant. The girl with the unconventional ambitions, the girl with the unconventional dreams that diverged so sharply from the expected path. A waiter passed by, offering flutes of chilled champagne on a silver tray. I took one, seeking a momentary respite. Across the room, my father stood tall and composed, the picture of dignified authority in his impeccably tailored dark gray suit. He was surrounded by a group of executives and former colleagues, his laughter booming through the air, his hand gestures expansive and animated, the retiring king holding court in his final moments of glory. I waited patiently for him to acknowledge my presence, to make eye contact. He didn't. Instead, his attention was solely focused on my brothers, clapping Ryan jovially on the back, his expression radiating undisguised pride. Back in the car, I didn't cry. I had anticipated tears. Instead, I felt something else, a strange sense of tranquility. And as the event coordinator politely requested that everyone find their designated seats, he remained seemingly oblivious to the fact that I was still standing silently near the entrance of the room, quietly wrestling with the difficult decision of whether I should have attended this event at all. Just as I made up my mind to quietly slip away, I felt a gentle but firm tug on my arm. "Alana." My mother's voice was soft and gentle, yet imbued with an underlying firmness. "Please don't leave. I truly believe he will say something meaningful. Tonight is supposed to be about all of us, not just him and the boys." I desperately wanted to believe her optimistic words. I wanted to cling to the hope that maybe, just maybe, for once in my life, he would acknowledge and recognize more than just his two sons and their carefully cultivated military accolades. That perhaps, After all these years of feeling unseen and unheard, he would finally utter my name with genuine pride and affection. But then the lights in the ballroom dimmed, casting a hush over the room, and the master of ceremonies took his position on the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with a flourish, "tonight we gather to celebrate the remarkable achievements of a true titan of industry, a man who has dedicated over 4 extraordinary decades of his life to the relentless advancement of aerospace technology. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to the one and only Richard Price." A thunderous wave of applause erupted from the assembled crowd. My father, beaming with pride, walked confidently onto the stage, waving to the audience with the practiced ease of a seasoned politician, pausing dramatically to allow the applause to swell before he finally began to speak. "Thank you. Thank you all so very much," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "This has truly been the journey of a lifetime, a fulfilling and rewarding experience beyond measure. And I wouldn't be standing here before you tonight without the unwavering support and love of my incredible family." I instinctively sat up a little straighter in my chair, my heart filled with a flicker of renewed hope. He offered a warm and genuine smile. "My sons, Kevin and Ryan, have always been an immense source of pride and joy in my life. Both of them have chosen to follow in my footsteps, embracing the values of service, leadership, and building a better future. Everything I have managed to achieve, I owe in large part to their dedication and unwavering belief in me. They carry the Price name with strength, honor, and distinction." The applause was deafening. People in the audience actually rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. Then, almost imperceptibly, his tone shifted, becoming softer, more subdued, almost tinged with a hint of nostalgia. "However," he continued, "it's important to acknowledge that not every child is necessarily equipped to excel on the same path. And that's perfectly acceptable. We are all endowed with unique talents and abilities, and some individuals simply meander." He deliberately omitted my name, but the implication was unmistakable. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving behind an icy sensation. His words landed with the chilling finality that only public humiliation can deliver. My daughter never truly had what it takes. That's what everyone in the room heard. Or, at the very least, that's how they interpreted his carefully chosen words. And when the polite yet undeniably sharp laughter rippled through the room, it cut through me with a force far greater than any silence ever could. I stood up abruptly. Every single eye in the room turned in my direction, their gazes filled with a mixture of curiosity and perhaps a hint of awkwardness. I walked slowly and deliberately forward, not toward the stage itself, but rather to its very edge. I held the small, elegantly wrapped green box in both hands, my grip firm and steady. My voice, remarkably, didn't waver or tremble. "From your greatest disappointment," I stated calmly and clearly, offering him the gift. "Enjoy your retirement." And with that, I turned and walked away, my heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. Not a single part of me faltered. Not a single part of me rushed or ran, and not a single part of me shrank in that moment. I didn't cast a single glance backward. I didn't immediately drive back to my hotel room after leaving the ballroom. Instead, I parked my car in a quiet and secluded corner of the hotel's parking garage. I turned off the engine, my hands remaining frozen on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My chest felt constricted, but not with the familiar pangs of panic. Not anymore. What I experienced was something altogether different, something slower and colder, akin to standing outside in the midst of a long-anticipated snowstorm, one that you had observed approaching for many years and had only now made the conscious decision to step into. On the passenger seat beside me, my evening clutch vibrated insistently. A text message from Mom, another from Claire, my closest and most trusted friend from college, who had vehemently urged me not to attend the retirement party in the first place, sensing the potential for emotional turmoil. And then, yet another message arrived. What exactly was inside the box? That particular text was from Ryan. I chose not to respond to any of them. I didn't even bother to open and read the messages because I was acutely aware that a significant moment was currently unfolding within the confines of that very ballroom, the one I had just walked out of, and the one I still hadn't entirely managed to emotionally detach myself from. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep within my bones, that my father wouldn't dare open the gift box immediately. Not in front of the assembled crowd of his peers and colleagues. He was far too composed and self-possessed for such a spontaneous display, far too concerned with maintaining a carefully cultivated image of composure and control. However, I also knew that his innate curiosity would eventually overpower his restraint. Because if there was one thing that Richard Price abhorred even more than any perceived weakness, it was the unsettling sensation of not being in complete control of a situation. It would likely take him less than 10 minutes, I estimated. The box itself was quite small and unassuming. Inside, nestled within layers of tissue paper, was a single framed photograph, a relic from the past that he had probably long forgotten even existed. A faded print that I had carefully preserved in a worn and tattered folder at the bottom of my closet for over 2 decades. It was a picture of the two of us, captured during a local science fair when I was approximately 12 years old. I had dedicated countless hours to meticulously constructing a detailed model of the solar system from nothing more than discarded cardboard, string, and paint. He had been remarkably reluctant to attend the event, viewing it as an unnecessary interruption to his important schedule. Mom had practically been forced to drag him there, insisting on his presence. I vividly recalled how stiff and uncomfortable he had appeared in the bustling crowd, his arms crossed defensively, his eyes darting around the room as if the entire affair was a colossal waste of his valuable time. However, something unexpected and significant had shifted within him that day, because, against all odds, I won first place in the entire district. And for a brief but unforgettable 5 minutes, he had looked genuinely and undeniably proud of me. Someone had skillfully captured the perfect moment with a camera. The resulting photograph showed me beaming with joy, proudly holding my blue ribbon, while he stood beside me with his hand resting gently on my shoulder, a rare and authentic smile gracing his lips. A real smile, not the strained and obligatory one he typically reserved for corporate photographs and public appearances. That fleeting moment, frozen in time, represented